Joining me now is best-selling author Douglas Murray. Douglas, let's start with Biden's worst nightmare. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. And it's Black and Hispanic voters abandoning him for Trump. The former president is picking up support from minority voters because they did better in his economy. What do you make of this phenomenon of minority voters leaving the Democrats for Trump?
Well, they've been trying to deal with it for some years, and they haven't been dealing with it very well. You'll remember, Rita, that in the Trump years, whenever any of the mainstream media noticed the fact that Black and Hispanic Americans were actually voting for Donald Trump in larger numbers than for previous Republican presidents and contenders, they really didn't know how to interpret this. And that's why they kept on falling back to the idea that actually these were a new type of white supremacist, usually a Hispanic white supremacist or a Black white supremacist. And it's very curious that I predict the same thing will happen in this cycle if Trump and Biden continue to be the likely contenders. They will continue, the media will continue to try to find ways to not understand these voters, but to demonize them or castigate them in some way. But of course, it is, as you mentioned, it is a very interesting observation that Black voters and other ethnic minority voters would be turning to Trump in larger numbers. It says something about his economic policies. It says something about Biden's economic policies and much more. So I do hope this time some of the media actually looks into the story rather than just trying to demonize the subject.
Well, Trump has won substantial gains with non-white voters. This is according to the latest New York Times Siena poll released over the weekend. Hispanic voters now actually favour Trump over Joe Biden by a 6-point margin. I mean, if you said that, I don't know, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, you would have been called crazy. But I tell you, Douglas, not everyone is coping with this new data. Have a look at this discussion between former NBA star Charles Barkley and CNN's Gayle King.
First of all, I'm just going to say this. If I see a Black person walking around with Trump mugshot, I'm going to punch him in the face.
Charles.
No, Gayle.
Charles.
Gayle.
You really can't say that because, A, you don't mean that.
Oh, I mean that sincerely.
How persuasive is celebrity opinion, celebrity endorsement, or celebrity shaming like we saw there for Black voters, female voters and young voters? Is this a factor in the election?
No, I mean, celebrity endorsements have been shown to be absolutely no use for many cycles now. Not least by Donald Trump's initial election win in 2016, where all the celebrity class came out against him, and it turned out the celebrity class weren't large enough in number, Rita, to make up for the voters. It's a very, very interesting thing because, of course, the more that people talk that sort of talk, the more that they enjoy ridiculing not just the candidate, but anyone who would vote for him. The more they just sort of expose themselves actually to a different type of political instinct, which is the political instinct of, I'm going to kick at you all. And actually, that instinct, not only can I get the rival, I can kick at all of those people who've been hectoring me and lecturing me from high moral positions for years. I can kick at all of you, and it's going to feel good. So the more that people talk like that and talk down to potential Trump voters, indeed voters of any kind, the more I think they'll realize that they lose the public.
I agree 100% there. But then I do look at someone like, I don't know, Taylor Swift, who is so adored. She just toured Australia and the euphoria was insane. And I wonder whether the young voters, the young women who look up to her would just blindly follow her endorsement. Might discuss that closer to the election. I'm interested in your take, Douglas, on this speech on leadership by an United States Air Force Academy Lieutenant Colonel Bree Fram. Have a listen.
All too often, I hear leaders talk about providing everyone with dignity and respect like it's an aspirational goal. That's not good enough. Dignity and respect is the bare minimum. It's the floor of where we can be. We must set our sights higher and focus on intentional inclusivity. So for all of you out there, I ask you to set out your symbols of pride, share your pronouns in your email, particularly if you're a person who doesn't think they need to. Initiate difficult conversations about racial and gender barriers, and share a bit of your vulnerability in a way that draws others in.
You can just imagine China or Russia watching that and being terrified of the US military. Fram is reportedly one of the highest ranking transgender officers in the United States military. And it's clear from that speech, Douglas, that there is an agenda there to embed this sort of activism in the military. Things like declaring your pronouns, listing them on your emails and on your business cards. What do you think of this?
I mean, it's preposterous, isn't it? Let's just start with the tone of those remarks. I mean, it's like somebody. It's not just sort of passive aggressive. It's pretty much aggressive, that tone, isn't it? The I'm going to tell you what you need to do, and especially those of you who don't think you need to know. I mean, it's no way to speak to anyone. Is the first observation, and by the way, I love that camera draw out onto the audience of sparsely attended poor blokes who are sitting there being hectored by this presumably male to female transsexual, telling them all that they have to put their pronouns in their bio. And they must all just be sitting there thinking, I hope this ends soon. But I would say not only that I would want the lecture to end soon, I'd want the whole era to end soon. And it will at some point. And I think I can say that with some confidence. It will end at some point because, you know, countries really don't have the luxury of doing this if they're the world's hyperpower. And if they're the country with the most serious military in the world that is effectively responsible for securing the peace around the world or otherwise, you know, they just don't have time for this stuff. And there will come a day, I don't know how soon it'll be or how far away it'll be, but there will come a day when these hectoring trans activists, they, them pronoun people just all have to go away. Because everything will have become too serious again. You know, in one way, it's of course ridiculous that we live in this era. On the other, in some ways, we should count our lucky stars that we actually, you know, that the situation is still not serious enough that people would actually be put up with being talked at like that.
Douglas, we've had Super Tuesday. Nikki Haley has finally backed out of the race. It's, as we expected, Trump v. Biden. What do you think that means for the rest of the world? The conflict in Ukraine, the conflict in Gaza, China's aggression. I know this is not an easy question, but you're about the only person who could give us a meaningful answer.
Of course, in some ways, going to be absolutely fascinating. In other ways, quite depressing to have a rerun of 2020 again. But you know, here we are. It'll be very interesting. I think the thing to watch out for is I mean, we know pretty much what Biden's policies are going to be. He's been running on them for the last 4 years. We know the sort of direction of travel. I think the interesting thing to watch out will be what Trump says, of course, on the campaign trail. Because whatever people think of him as a candidate, he does actually try to stick to the broad outline of what he's promised in the run, in all of those stadium events and others that he'll be enjoying doing in the months ahead. If he does start to make noises about Ukraine, you know, I think you could sort of pretty much believe them. And the same with the Middle East. China, of course, is for Trump a very important issue, and it's important because he's the politician who changed the weather on China. In not just the States, but in the world. He took an extremely unpopular position in regarding China as the hostile competitor that it is. at a time when everyone else was just wanting to hoover up the Chinese money on offer. It'll be very interesting to watch him on this issue, because he has actually tilted not just the Republican Party, but the Democrats too on the China issue. So if he decides to run on it in a more hawkish direction, that'll definitely be worth noting. Beijing will note it, as will other allies and potential rivals and enemies around the world.
Now, before you go, it's clear now that the Republican Party is Trump's party. I think there's little doubt about that. What does that mean for America, and what does that mean for politicians in the UK, perhaps here in Australia, who have ignored their base? I think what's happened with this Trump phenomenon is entirely because of the GOP for so many years saying one thing to win power, and then when they have that power, behaving entirely differently.
Yes, I mean, I think that the Trumpification of the Republican Party is obviously, if at a conclusion in a way. The party has done everything it can to try to replace him, and it just hasn't worked. Even him sitting out all the debates just got him a bigger and bigger lead. Every indictment against him gets him a bigger and bigger lead. I think that the challenge for the party is that so many people, and it's the same for conservatives and others abroad who have said critical things about Trump. There has been a rush to say as many negative things about Trump as possible, for lots of reasons, many of them just well-founded, based in people's analysis of his character. On other occasions, as with some conservative politicians abroad, totally futilely, just to sort of insult him and to gain some virtue points with their and his opponents. The problem for them all is that Trump really doesn't forget that sort of stuff. I was speculating last night with some people that I think it's going to be very interesting if he does win, and the polls currently show that he would in a runoff against Biden. It's a big question of how he fills the administration, how he fills positions. It was pretty tough last time after the 2016 win. I think it'll be very tough this time, unless there's some kind of pax in the Republican Party and people who previously badmouthed Trump are allowed back in by him and they agree to serve. It's going to be a very interesting juncture. We've never quite been here before.
And I wonder if he's going to remember some of the nasty things politicians around the world have said about him, including members of the Albanese government right here in Australia. We've had senior ministers be very foolish in tweeting things and saying things, mouthing off to appeal to the Twitter base, and I think that's going to come back to haunt them, because he does tend to remember those jibes. Douglas Murray, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Great pleasure. Thank you.